Ever feel like you're drowning in to-dos? Like you're
Wow.
saying yes to everything, and then by the end of the day, you're like, wait, what did I even do today?
Yeah, like you're just spinning your wheels.
Totally. Well, today we're diving into a book that tackles this head-on. Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less. We're going to break down the key ideas and figure out how to actually apply them. Think of this as like a cheat sheet for clarity. We're giving you the distilled wisdom to help you zero in on what truly matters and ditch all the noise, all that non-essential stuff.
Exactly. So you can feel focused and in control instead of totally frazzled.
Right. Less stress, more impact. That's the goal.
So we're going to dissect the mindset that keeps us stuck in that chaotic cycle of doing too much of the wrong stuff.
Yeah, like always busy, but never getting to the truly important things.
We'll explore the power of making deliberate choices,
Yeah.
like really owning your yeses and nos. And of course, we'll dig into why figuring out the vital few things from the mountain of trivial many is a total game changer.
Okay, love that. Vital few versus trivial many. Got to remember that one.
We'll also tackle those tough trade-offs we all have to make, the importance of giving yourself some mental white space, and how to actually see what really matters in the midst of all the chaos. Plus, we'll even get into why things like play and sleep, they're not luxuries. They're essential tools for being more effective.
That's interesting. Play and sleep as tools. Okay, I'm intrigued.
We'll also dive into setting super high standards for what gets your yes, and mastering the art of saying no, gracefully but firmly. And we'll talk about why preparing for the unexpected, building in some buffer is more strategic than just like hoping for the best.
Right, because stuff always happens.
Exactly. We'll explore the surprising momentum you can build from those small wins and the power of routine and laser focus.
Cool, so like building systems and habits to support our essential goals.
Exactly. Now, the book also has these really relatable stories woven in, like the author's decision to walk away from law school.
Oh, I remember that. Big decision.
And there's Jeff's story, where he had this serious health crisis because he was pushing himself way too hard.
Yeah, that was a huge wake-up call.
It shows that this isn't just some abstract philosophy.
Yeah.
It has real-world consequences.
So let's unpack this essential stuff, see how we can apply it to our lives.
All right, sounds good. So let's kick things off by looking at the mindset that essentialism is really up against. It's what the book calls the non-essentialist approach to life.
I feel like I know this one all too well.
Yeah, it's like you're being tossed around in a storm, just constantly reacting to whatever comes at you. And there's this deep-seated habit of saying yes to almost anything without even stopping to think, is this actually important?
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. The people pleaser in me is strong.
The book has this great analogy. It calls it majoring in minor activities.
Yeah.
And the problem isn't just that you're busy, it's that you're busy with the wrong things.
Right, like you can have a packed schedule, but still not be making any real progress on the things that truly matter.
Essentialism is all about constantly asking yourself, is this a major activity, something that's truly moving me toward my goals? Or is this just a minor distraction that's like disguised as productivity?
That's so good. I need to write that down. Majoring in minor activities. Oof, that one hits close to home.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
Like you're constantly in motion, but at the end of the day, you're like, what did I actually accomplish that made a real difference?
And that feeling is so deflating. Okay, so the book has a really powerful story that illustrates this point, right? The author talks about being at the hospital right after his daughter was born, a moment that should have been filled with pure joy and connection.
And it's interesting because, even in that moment, he felt this pressure to prioritize work.
I remember that. A colleague even made a comment about how the timing of his daughter's birth was inconvenient.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking.
And the crazy part is he actually went to that client meeting, like right after his daughter was born.
It really shows how strong that yes reflex can be, even when it goes against our deepest values.
What really struck me about that story was how he mentions that the meeting ended up being totally pointless. Nothing of any real consequence came from it.
Exactly. And that's the feeling we want to avoid, right? That sense of misplaced effort, like sacrificing something truly precious for something that ultimately doesn't matter.
Totally. Okay, so the book talks about this cycle that non-essentialists get caught in. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So it often starts with a clear purpose, right? You're focused on a goal, and that naturally leads to some initial success.
Okay, so you're on the right track, you're seeing some wins. What happens next?
Well, that success can actually be what sets the stage for the next phase, which is becoming the go-to person.
Oh, right, because you're the one who gets things done.
Exactly. You've built a reputation for being reliable, for being competent, and suddenly you're flooded with requests and opportunities. People start expecting you to handle more and more.
Ah, yeah, the classic double-edged sword of competence. You're so good that you get buried under everyone else's needs.
Exactly. And that leads to the third phase, which is diffused effort.
So instead of focusing on that initial purpose, you're spreading yourself too thin.
Right. You're trying to juggle all these new demands, and it's like trying to pour water into 10 different glasses at once. You end up with a little bit in each glass, but none of them are full.
And I imagine that's when things start to feel really overwhelming and chaotic.
Absolutely. And that scattered effort then leads to the fourth phase, which is distraction from your highest level of contribution. You're so bogged down with all these things that you lose sight of what truly matters, the very activities that fueled your initial success.
So it's like this weird paradox. Striving for more actually undermines the clarity and focus that got you there in the first place.
Exactly. It's the undisciplined pursuit of more, not the disciplined pursuit of less.
It reminds me of what Jim Collins talks about in How the Mighty Fall. He talks about how successful companies can stumble by chasing too many opportunities and losing their focus.
Yeah, that's a great connection. And it really resonates with this cultural message we're constantly bombarded with, this idea that we have to do it all, have it all, be it all.
Oh, yeah, the myth of you can have it all. It's everywhere.
It's in the advertising that tells us we need more stuff.
Yeah.
The job descriptions that list like a million required skills.
And don't forget the pressure cooker of college applications. You need a laundry list of extracurriculars just to get your foot in the door.
And social media definitely doesn't help. It's like everyone else is having it all, at least in their carefully curated online world.
Totally. It creates this pressure to keep up, to be constantly doing more.
And what's really interesting is how the book explores the word priority.
Oh, yeah, tell me about that.
So it entered the English language back in the 1400s, and it was singular. It meant the very first or prior thing. And get this, it stayed singular for 500 years.
Wow, I never knew that. So, for centuries, the concept of a priority implied that there was only one truly most important thing.
Exactly. It wasn't until the 1900s that we pluralized it and started talking about priorities.
So we basically tried to bend reality by changing the word, thinking we could somehow have multiple first things at the same time.
It's like a linguistic sleight of hand to avoid making tough choices.
But, of course, you can't actually have more than one most important thing.
Right. And that brings us to our next key principle, the power of choice.
Yes, let's talk about that.
The book's section on choose starts with this powerful quote from Madeline L'Engle. It is the ability to choose which makes us human. It reminds us that we have agency. We're not just passive recipients of demands and obligations.
I love that quote. It's so empowering.
The author also shares a relatable experience from his time in law school. He realized that by trying to keep all his options open, dabbling in law, management, writing, he wasn't truly excelling in any of them.
Yeah, I remember that part. It's like the classic jack of all trades, master of none situation.
And that's when he started questioning the value of having so many irons in the fire. It's tough realization because we're often rewarded for doing more, regardless of the actual impact.
Right. It's like our society values busyness over focused effort. But the book really challenges that more is better mentality.
That's where the Pareto principle comes in, the 80-20 rule.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic productivity principle. 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts.
And building on that, there's Joseph Moses Juran, who coined the term the law of the vital few. He found that you can achieve massive improvements in quality by focusing on just a small percentage of the underlying problems.
It's about identifying those leverage points, those things that have an outsized impact.
Exactly. And he actually saw this play out in Japan, which at the time had a reputation for making low-quality goods. But by strategically focusing their efforts on improving a few key areas, they completely changed their global standing.
That's amazing. It shows the power of focused effort. And the book has another great example from the investment world, right? Warren Buffett's approach.
Yeah, Buffett's famously lazy investing style. He makes a small number of investments and holds them for the long term. And get this, 90% of his wealth comes from just 10 investments.
That's wild. It really highlights the power of focusing on what truly matters and letting go of all the rest.
And it brings us to the concept of trade-offs, which is a really essential part of being an essentialist.
Okay, let's talk about that.
So it's not just about identifying what's essential. It's about making those tough choices, those deliberate decisions to prioritize the essential, even if it means letting go of other seemingly good options.
It's about being okay with saying no.
Exactly. And the book quotes Michael Porter here. Strategy is about making choices, trade-offs. It's about deliberately choosing to be different. It's not about doing everything well. It's about choosing what not to do so you can excel at what truly matters.
Okay, I love that. Choosing what not to do.
And the book has this perfect example with Southwest Airlines. They didn't try to be everything to everyone. They made deliberate choices to become a low-cost carrier.
Right, point-to-point flights, no meals, open seating. They really streamline their operations.
And Herb Kelleher, their CEO, had this great quote about it. He said, you have to look at every opportunity and say, well, no, we're not going to do 1,000 different things that really won't contribute much to the end result we are trying to achieve.
So it's about ruthless prioritization, saying no to the things that don't align with your core goals.
And the book contrasts this with Continental Airlines, which tried to imitate Southwest with their Continental Light program, but they didn't fully commit to the low-cost model.
So they ended up stuck in the middle, right? Not as efficient as Southwest, but also not offering the full service experience of their main brand.
Exactly. And it highlights Porter's point that a strategic position isn't sustainable without making those tough trade-offs.
So it's not just about being good at lots of things. It's about being great at a few very specific things.
Right. The book also has some examples from outside the business world, too, like the story of how Johnson & Johnson responded to the Tylenol crisis.
Oh, yeah. That was a huge test of their values.
They had this credo, this set of guiding principles, and it helped them prioritize customer safety, even when it meant taking a big financial hit. It showed the power of having clear priorities in a really difficult situation.
And it's not just about these big corporate decisions, right? The book also talks about personal examples of trade-offs.
Yeah, like parents who strategically focus their sons' extracurricular activities to achieve a specific goal. Or a couple who decided not to join a bunch of social clubs so they could spend more time with their kids.
Right. It's about making intentional choices in every area of your life, recognizing that you can't do everything.
And all this, making these choices, embracing trade-offs, it requires clarity and the ability to step back from the day-to-day demands to see the bigger picture.
Which brings us to the next key principle, creating space to explore.
Yes, the escape section. It's about recognizing that in our busy world, we actually need to create space for thinking, for reflecting, for just being.
It's counterintuitive, right? Because we're always told to maximize every minute.
But the book argues that strategically creating downtime is essential for achieving our highest level of contribution.
And they have a great anecdote about Isaac Newton. Apparently, a lot of his groundbreaking discoveries, like the law of universal gravitation, came from periods of intense solitary focus.
He really created that mental space for deep thinking. And the author talks about his own monk mode, where he blocks off large chunks of time for writing and eliminates all distractions.
No email, no calls, no meetings, just pure, uninterrupted focus.
And it's not just for writers. Bill Gates, even during Microsoft's busiest times, would schedule regular think weeks. He would isolate himself to read and think about the bigger picture.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. I don't know if I could handle a whole think week, but I love the idea of incorporating smaller versions of that into my routine.
Yeah, the book suggests things like spending the first 20 minutes of your day reading something thought-provoking instead of checking email. Yeah. It's about creating those pockets of uninterrupted time for reflection.
That's a great idea. It's about shifting from just reacting to events to proactively shaping your priorities and your direction.
And once you have that space, you're much better equipped to see what really matters amidst all the noise, which is the focus of our next principle.
Okay, tell me about look.
It's all about developing that ability to see beyond the surface level information that's constantly bombarding us, to understand the deeper meaning, the point.
It makes me think of that T.S. Eliot quote, "Where is the knowledge we have lost in information?" It's so relevant in our age of information overload.
And the book shares this great lesson from Nora Ephron's journalism teacher. He emphasized that true journalism wasn't just about reporting the facts. It was about figuring out the essential point of the story and why it matters.
I remember that story. He said the essential lead to a story about a faculty meeting was simply, "There will be no school Thursday." It's about cutting through the noise to get to the heart of the matter.
Exactly. And the book encourages us to become journalists of our own lives, to constantly ask ourselves what truly matters amidst all this chaos.
To not get swept away by all the distractions.
And one practical way to do that is by keeping a journal. But the book suggests applying the less but better principle to journaling itself. Start with writing just a little bit consistently, and then review your entries to look for patterns and insights.
So it's not about writing pages and pages every day. It's about being intentional with your journaling.
And the author tells the story about a business simulation team that really struggled because they hadn't clearly defined the question they were trying to answer.
It's a good reminder that before we can take effective action, we need to be clear about what we're actually trying to achieve.
Right. And this ability to see what truly matters, it's crucial for making effective choices and meaningful trade-offs. And one of the things that can actually help us see more clearly and think more creatively is something we often dismiss as frivolous: play.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by this idea. Play is a core principle of essentialism.
It is, and it challenges the notion that play is a waste of time. The book actually argues that it's essential for creativity, innovation, and well-being.
Makes sense. When we're relaxed and having fun, we're more likely to come up with new ideas.
Exactly. The book quotes Sir Ken Robinson, who says that the modern education system often stifles creativity by removing leisure and pleasure from learning.
It's like we're so focused on being productive that we forget the importance of just letting loose and having fun.
And the book explains how this emphasis on efficiency and like this almost military-inspired management style has led a lot of companies to undervalue play in the workplace.
Yeah, it's seen as unprofessional or unproductive.
But research actually shows that play has all these benefits. It improves our health, strengthens relationships, enhances learning, and fuels innovation.
So it's not just about having fun, it's actually good for us in all these ways.
It helps our brains be more adaptable and creative. And there are companies that are embracing this, Like Twitter has improv classes for employees, and Google has those playful offices with slides and stuff.
I love that. It shows that playfulness can actually be a competitive advantage.
And speaking of things that are essential for peak performance, we have to talk about sleep.
Yes, sleep. Protect the asset. This is a big one.
The book opens this section with a quote from Gandhi, who said that sleep is like a daily experience of death and rebirth. It really captures the restorative power of sleep.
I love that imagery. It's like we die to the day and are reborn each morning.
And the book shares this really powerful story about Jeff, a super-driven CEO who ended up having a serious health crisis because he was chronically sleep-deprived.
Yeah, that was a scary reminder that we can't push ourselves endlessly without consequences.
And his big takeaway was the importance of protecting the asset, meaning his own well-being.
It's so easy to sacrifice sleep when we're busy, but it's like neglecting the foundation of our house.
Exactly. And there's research to back this up. The book talks about a study on top violinists, where the amount of sleep they got was a key factor that distinguished them from good violinists.
Interesting. So even for something as skill-based as playing the violin, sleep plays a huge role.
And there's even a Harvard Business Review article called Sleep Deficit, the Performance Killer. It's that serious.
Okay, message received. I'm going to prioritize my sleep more.
Good. Now, once we're well rested and have that ability to see what really matters, how do we decide what to commit to? That's where the concept of extreme criteria comes in.
Okay, tell me more about SELECT.
It introduces Derek Sivers' hell yeah or no principle. Basically, if you're not super enthusiastic about something, your default answer should be no.
I love that. It's about reserving your yeses for the things that really light you up.
Exactly. And the book is a great example of Vitso's hiring process. They have this super rigorous, multi-stage process to make sure they only hire people who are a perfect fit.
They'd rather be understaffed than hire the wrong person.
And they even have a founding member question, where they ask candidates if they'd be willing to do whatever it takes to make the company successful.
Wow, that's a high bar. But it shows how committed they are to finding the right people.
And this section also addresses the fear of missing out, which can make it hard to say no to opportunities. But the book shares the story of Nancy Duarte, who transformed her company by focusing on just one thing: presentation design.
So by saying no to everything else, she was able to really excel in her chosen niche.
And the book gives us some killer questions to help us eliminate the non-essential, like, if I didn't already own this, how much would I be willing to spend to buy it today?
That's a good one. It helps you detach from the sunk cost fallacy and really evaluate the value of something.
And once we've gotten better at being selective and saying no, we need to protect our time and energy by setting boundaries.
Right. That's clarify, the freedom of setting boundaries.
The book quotes Anne Lamott here: "No is a complete sentence." It also has this empowering story about a woman who surprised her manager by simply saying no to taking on an extra project right before her wedding.
Good for her. She prioritized her personal time.
Setting boundaries is about protecting ourselves from being pulled in too many directions by other people's agendas.
It's about creating the space to focus on our own priorities.
And the book outlines different types of boundaries: physical, emotional, mental, even social boundaries.
Right. It's about being mindful of our limits in all areas of our lives.
And it also shares Clayton Christensen's strategy of having a personal board of directors. These are trusted advisors who can help you filter requests and make important decisions.
That's a really cool idea. It's like having your own personal advisory council.
And the book gives some tips for saying no more effectively, like separating the decision from the relationship or offering a simple, "I am not the right person for this."
It's about being clear and respectful while still standing firm in your boundaries.
Now, even with the best plans and boundaries, life throws curveballs. That's why the next principle is all about preparing for the unexpected.
Okay, tell me about buffer.
It uses the contrasting stories of two expeditions to the South Pole. Roald Amundsen, who was successful, built in a lot of slack and safety margins into his plans. Robert Falcon Scott, who tragically died on the journey, didn't.
So Amundsen was prepared for the worst, while Scott was hoping for the best.
Exactly. And research by Jim Connells and Morton Hansen shows that companies that thrive in tough conditions aren't necessarily better at predicting the future, but they're better prepared for the unexpected.
It's about being proactive, not reactive.
And the book recommends adding a 50% buffer to our time estimates.
Wow, that's a lot. But I guess it makes sense considering how often we underestimate how long things take.
It's called the planning fallacy. We tend to be overly optimistic about our timelines.
And the book uses the analogy of the scout leader and Herbie, the slowest hiker, from the goal to illustrate the importance of focusing on the biggest constraint.
It's about identifying those bottlenecks and building in buffers to mitigate their impact.
Okay, so we've clarified our priorities, set boundaries, and prepared for the unexpected. What's next?
Now it's about taking action. And the Essentialist understands the power of starting small.
Tell me about advance, the power of small wins.
It contrasts the non-essentialist approach of trying to do everything at once, which often leads to burnout, with the essentialist strategy of starting small and celebrating progress.
It's about building momentum through those small wins.
Exactly. And the book has this cool example of the Richmond Police Department's Positive Tickets program. They started rewarding good behavior in young people, and it led to a significant decrease in crime.
That's amazing. It shows how small, positive reinforcements can create big changes.
And the book quotes Henry B. Eyring. Small things done consistently can change everything. There's also this interesting experiment where a family used a token system to encourage their kids to read and reduce screen time.
So, by creating a system and making small changes, they were able to achieve their goals.
And the book advises us to ask, what is the smallest amount of progress that will be useful and valuable? It's about finding those minimal viable steps.
Right, like what's the smallest action I can take today that will move me closer to my goal?
And Pixar's movie development process is a great example of this. They build towards their final film through tons of small steps, like storyboarding and animation tests.
It's about breaking down a big goal into manageable chunks.
And stay motivated, the book recommends visually rewarding your progress. Use a chart or something to track your wins and keep the momentum going.
I love that. It's like gamifying your progress.
And over time, those small, consistent wins can solidify into habits through the power of routine.
Okay, let's talk about routine.
This section explains how routines make even difficult tasks easier over time, because our brains get better at them. It's like learning a new word or driving a familiar route. It takes effort at first, but eventually it becomes automatic.
Right, our brains create those neural pathways that make it effortless.
And the book has this great example of Michael Phelps' pre-race routine. It was this incredibly detailed sequence of actions that helped him get into the zone.
So routine can create a sense of calm and focus, even in high-pressure situations.
Exactly. And the book also talks about Charles Duhigg's habit loop, the cue, the routine, the reward. And it gives tips for changing unwanted habits by altering either the cue or the reward.
So if you want to change a habit, you need to understand the triggers and the payoffs.
And it also suggests mixing up your routines periodically to prevent boredom. Jack Dorsey, for example, assigns themed days to different work areas.
That's a cool idea. It's like structured flexibility.
And all of this, all these principles, they lead to the ability to be fully present and focused on the current moment.
Okay, let's talk about focus.
It emphasizes the power of being in the now. rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. It even talks about those ancient Greek concepts of chronos, which is chronological time, and kairos, which is opportune or qualitative time.
So it's about being present in those moments where time seems to stand still because you're so engaged in what you're doing.
And the book has this anecdote about a guy who was completely distracted by a text message during a job interview. It's a perfect illustration of how we lose focus in our multitasking world.
Yeah, we're constantly bombarded with distractions.
And the book distinguishes between multitasking, which usually leads to lower quality work, and multifocusing, which is about quickly switching between tasks, but still giving each one your full attention.
So it's not about doing multiple things at the same time, it's about being intentional with your attention.
And the book offers some techniques for being more present, like identifying the most important thing right now, or getting future worries out of your head by writing them down.
It's about training your mind to stay focused on the present moment.
And all of this leads to the ultimate goal of living an essential life.
Okay, tell me about BE.
It shares the story of Gandhi's transformation. After a moment of clarity, he dedicated his life to a higher purpose and eliminated everything non-essential from his own life.
He simplified his life to amplify his impact.
And the book mentions other figures who embraced essentialism in their own way, like Buddha, Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa. It's a timeless principle.
It's about focusing on what truly matters to create a life of meaning and contribution.
And it revisits the paradox of success, how achieving success can actually lead to chasing more and more, which can ultimately dilute your efforts.
So success can actually become a trap if you're not careful.
The way out is through essentialism. The author also shares his own experience of knowing that Stanford was the right path for his graduate studies. It wasn't about comparing options, it was about a sense of clarity and alignment.
It's about trusting your gut and feeling confident in your choices.
And he ends with a reflection on the importance of family and the limited time we have. He urges us to be selective about how we spend our time and to live without regret.
Powerful stuff. Okay, so let's bring it all together. What's the core message of essentialism?
It's about doing less, but better. It's about consciously choosing the vital few things that truly matter and eliminating the trivial many.
It's about being intentional with your time, your energy, and your life.
Exactly. And for you, our listener, embracing these principles can lead to greater clarity, less overwhelm, more productivity on what truly matters, and ultimately a more meaningful life.
It's about creating a life that's aligned with your values and your goals.
So as you reflect on this, ask yourself, what is the one thing that if you focused on it relentlessly and eliminated everything else, would have the biggest positive impact on your life right now?
That's a great question to ponder. It's about getting clear on your priorities and making choices that support them.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into essentialism. We hope you found it valuable and thought-provoking.
We encourage you to keep exploring these ideas and see how you can apply them to your own life.
And remember, the disciplined pursuit of less can lead to a life that's more fulfilling and impactful.
Thanks for listening.